How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the very first episode of my brand new podcast. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Jeff. You can also find me on Twitter at JC with the Shot, on Instagram. This is Jay Cox, and you can find me on Twitch and YouTube as well. I started a brand new channel just for this podcast, and I'm going to go into what my hopes and dreams of this podcast are going to be, as well as we're gonna get started with the first conversation piece that I really want to focus on this week. So, without further ado, let's kick it. Welcome to For the Love of Humankind, a podcast that has a focus on human compassion, human stories, human life. And it's going to be a focal point on what is happening in the world today, a focal point on the stories that people have had that have either inspired them or made them who they are. And I am super excited for this project. I'm super excited for this podcast. I did a podcast on my other channel called Leveling Up with JC with the Shot, which was a lot of fun to do, but I felt pretty limited with it because I wanted to talk about things other than video games and other than how video games inspire and create people, and how we can tie real life things into those that play video games. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. I'm still going to post some stuff over on that podcast as well, but I really wanted to start a new direction with For the Love of Humankind, because over the past year, over the past 4 years, over my lifetime, there has been so many things that I think have really made me as a person. And there have been a lot of societal experiences and issues going on that have impacted me and the way that I view the world. And so this is my chance to work through that and talk about how that impacts not only me, but bringing people on and talking about how it impacts them. Now you'll see that this setup is a little bit different than a typical podcast, and this is something I'm going to continue to play with. I don't know that I'm necessarily set on the setup, but let me tell you, it looks kind of cool. You're not going to find this anywhere else. So I'm excited to really launch this podcast and be a part of something new. I like to talk a lot. I like to ramble, for those of you that don't know me. And for those of you that this might be your first time interacting with me, welcome. I welcome you. And I hope that you find some really great things to take away from this podcast. And as I continue this journey, I am always looking to bring people on to talk about their journey in life and talk about stories of compassion and stories of growth, and really anything that you want to talk about. There isn't going to be a podcast episode in this series that resembles another. That's where I felt limited in my last podcast, and that's where I want to change, because I felt it was very repetitive in my last one. So here we are, For the Love of Humankind, and welcome to week 1. Now, this episode is called A New Hope. Now, you can cue Anakin, you can cue Leia. They'll probably be over here somewhere. I promise you this is not a Star Wars episode. Although, who knows? We may have a Star Wars episode in the future. I don't know. We'll see. But A New Hope, right? So, this past week, actually, I'm going to go back even further than that. These past 4 years have been a shit show. They've been a shit show. Like, who's going to argue that? I'll tell you who's going to argue that. Insurrectionists, people who bleed Republican, people who are as far right as they come. They're going to say the last 4 years were great. Those are the facts, people. They are going to say that the last 4 years have been great. And now let me preface this by saying, by no means is this podcast a political podcast, but politics influences and impacts people every single day. So there are chances that this is going to pop up. And here we are, first episode. First episode, and it's popping up already. And that's fine, because I think that this week, so today is January 22nd. So earlier this week, right, we saw an end to 4 years of whatever that was. I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't know what it was. There are a lot of words I could use, but, you know, come on now. I don't think we need to think too hard about that. So, on the 20th, right, Inauguration Day, Biden, Harris, their first day in the White House, right? Their first day as an administration. And I will tell you, I watched all of the inauguration that I could. And I could not help but to cry. I was in tears. But also feel hopeful. Like, I felt more hope on Wednesday than I have probably in the last 4 years, especially in the last year, right? Because the last year, in my opinion, has been the worst out of the last 4 years. And that's saying a lot. Now, I know that I have you know, family members that voted for Trump, and great. But I'm hoping that if you watch this podcast, you're going to understand everything that unfolded and everything that I said and did during, you know, this last year, and why I did that, right? I've been doing so much research and so much reading on our political system, why it is the way that it is, how it has changed, and it's been super interesting. But, like I said, Wednesday was the day that I felt the most hopeful I have in the last 4 years. Why? Why did I feel hopeful? There are plenty of reasons that I felt hopeful. One, democracy worked. And by democracy worked, I mean the election was not stolen. It was not stolen. Now, a lot of people will contend that idea. A lot of people will look to Georgia and look to the conversation that Trump had, you know, with the individuals down there about trying to find 11,000 votes, right? Happened to find one vote more than what he needed. Great. Okay. So that's a fact. There is voice recordings of that phone call that took place. And by no means am I here to shame Trump. Actually, I might be. Who knows? But hear me out. You know, our democracy worked. You know, our electoral college did its thing, which I hate the electoral college. Get rid of it. Our election worked. Great. I'm not going to say get rid of that because we need that. And then the election runoff in Georgia worked. And yes, people are freaking out because there have been votes that have been found randomly. Yo, Republicans, they weren't found randomly. We are literally in a pandemic. We are literally in a position where we had more mail-in votes than we ever have had in history. Plus, every election, there are always votes that come in late from those that are in the military overseas. That is a fact. That is a fact. Now, aside from, the election not being stolen, right? A couple weeks ago, we saw an insurrection at the Capitol building, right? We saw MAGA supporters, we saw Oath Keepers, we saw terrorists taking hold of the Capitol with the expectation to take hostages. There were dudes walking around the Capitol with military grade zip ties to take hostages. There were Congress members that were fearing for their lives. Now, I'm not going to go into depth saying that this was an inside job. We don't know that yet. There is a possibility that it was. But that is neither here nor there. When that day happened, my hope for this country and my hope for humanity was at an all-time low. I could not help but to fear, not only for my life, but fear for my friends that come from marginalized backgrounds, that, if somebody were to look at them, if, God forbid, a police officer were to pull them over for no reason, that they would be assaulted and taken to jail just because the color of their skin. Now, that isn't a new fear. That is not a new fear at all. That is something that I have encountered in the presence of my friends years ago. Now, people are going to say that the system is not racist. It is. Newsflash, it's racist. If you don't believe me, check out the prison system. Come on now. Prison system is pretty racist. It's basically slavery. But, here we are. America, the beautiful, the great. It's not that great. And I say that. I say that, one, jokingly, but two, in all seriousness, because what has happened over time in our political system is that we have become so polarized in the way that we view things, right? For example, let's take a look back at the 90s, right? And political parties. And for those of you that are watching this, for those of you that are older and may have had the opportunity to vote in those elections, there was a chance that if you viewed yourself as Republican, that you voted for somebody that was Democrat. And if you, identified as somebody that was Democrat, there was a chance that you voted as Republican. The reason being is that our political system wasn't as skewed as it is today. Now, a lot of times, and in research, this has, been viewed for so many years. Those that identify as independent, those that are considered swing voters, were everywhere in the 90s and even before that. They were everywhere. Even in the early 2000s, there were still swing voters. Meaning, they could vote either way. They recognize that Republicans have some great ideals and Democrats have some great ideals. But where is that today? One of the crazy things that I've been reading about it and really focusing on is, why did our system become the way that it did, right? Do you all actually know why we are the way that we are? It probably slipped right under your nose, and you probably didn't even notice that big of a change. because it was so incremental and it was so small of changes throughout decades that you thought it was just, changing because of the times. Now I'm going to challenge that because I have a lot of people in my life that I have disagreed with very, very strongly over the last year in particular. I have lost people in my life because of our disagreements, because they don't understand why the situation is what it is. Those that supported Donald Trump don't understand where I have been coming from with this. And so in 2008, presidential candidate Barack Obama took a stance on immigration that would deport illegal immigrants from this country. A Democratic candidate said that in 2008. This was 13 years ago. Let that sink in. A Democratic candidate was not in support of immigrants. Okay, Jeff, what does that mean? Along the way, because Republicans were in support of immigrants being deported for not having a legal status. This is before Dreamers existed. This is before DACA existed. Republicans were for this. And so, because of that fact, Democrats took it upon their House beliefs, or their, I shouldn't say House, party beliefs, to support immigrants being a part of this country, whether they're legal or not. Okay, so that is a really good example of polarization. One party supports it, supports supporting immigrants. The other party, because this party supports deporting, is going to support providing them resources and providing them an opportunity to be in our country, right? That is polarization. One party believes one way because the other party believes the opposite. We have seen this all throughout history, and nothing more apparent than the last election. And let me tell you why. Because Republicans do not want to lose power. Democrats don't want to lose power, right? Parties want to control the legislature, and they want to control the presidency. Because each side fears the other party is going to do something that's going to be detrimental to the other party, whether it happens or not. Now, here's a kicker on top of that, right? One of the things that I have challenged people within the last year that were voting for Trump, right, is there are many things out there signaling and giving us facts that Trump has been a terrible person. But people continue to vote for him. Why? Because he was representing the Republican Party. We are no longer in a world where you can support a candidate aside without supporting that party, and vice versa. If you identify as a Republican, no matter who your Republican candidate is going to be, you are going to vote Republican. Same with Democrat. We have lost throughout the last few decades. We have lost this sensibility of these swing voters. The percentage of swing voters has gone so low in these elections because people feel like they have to pick one side or another. Now, I don't believe in a two-party system at all. I don't believe in it. I think, again, it leads to that polarization. But on top of that polarization, we see individuals that will gather information. So say you watch Fox News, or say you watch CNN. CNN tends to lean left. Fox News tends to go right. You see one situation, we're going to use the insurrection at the Capitol as the focal point here. CNN, you watch the insurrection, and you start to see, labeling MAGA. CNN, by the way, never called them terrorists. There were analysts that called these individuals terrorists, which they were, that were destroying federal property, that had come in with the ideals of kidnapping and holding people hostage. Great. Not great. But CNN reported that, right? CNN reported this being insurrectionists, reported them breaking, and entering in federal property, all of these different things. Now you go to Fox News, that same situation, you are seeing the exact same scenario. Fox News is going to say pro-Trump protests lead to violence from X, Y, and Z, right? Fox News is never going to say that it was the protesters' part because they are pro-Trump, pro-Republican. And if you consume media directly from the left wing, you consume media directly from the right wing, you're going to get these images and false news about the other party, because the other media is going to vilify those in the opposite party. Now, since social media has started, this has gotten worse. YouTube, for example, if you were to watch something on YouTube that sparked your eye, or it was like, oh my gosh, that looks great, like that seems really interesting, and it's a conspiracy theory about whatever, and then then it recommends another video that is like similar to that, but starts to lean one way over the next, like over the other, right? So you could watch a conspiracy theory about how the election was rigged. Okay. On that sidebar on YouTube, you are probably going to see a video from Ben Shapiro. Then you are probably going to find another video recommended after you watch that video from Ben Shapiro that is someone that is more right-winged than Shapiro. And then it's going to continue, because then you are going to continue down this rabbit hole of right-wing media. Same thing goes for the left. I am not just saying this for the right wings. Same thing goes for the left, right? Because we consume what we want to consume. We find one news outlet, we find one person that we agree with, and then we start to see information from other people that think like that. And that is why we have become so polarized, because there is no way to dissent that information. And so it makes sense. I'm not saying this is right, but it makes sense as to why right-wing individuals begin to vilify people like AOC. Begin to vilify people like Ilhan Omar, right? We start to see these things because they disagree with what our party is for and what our party wants. Now, that has been happening for a long time. Like I said, it's gotten worse ever since social media has grown. So, polarization has happened in our country. Okay. So, how does that relate to inauguration, me feeling hopeful, being where we're at? The inauguration was the first time in the last 4 years that I felt that we had a presidential candidate that was looking, I shouldn't even say presidential candidate, the president was there for the people. Our Constitution says, we the people. Now, granted, the Constitution itself is a hot mess of a document, because it was written by white men who were slave owners, who, when they said we the people, were talking about other white people. So again, a system made on racism and built on racism. So back to the inauguration and having a president that is there for the people, right? On Inauguration Day, President Biden signed 17 orders to be put into effect immediately. 1, COVID response. We're in a pandemic, people. Come on. I need you to think about things. Why are you going outside without a mask? This shit's not fake. It's not. We have had 400,000 people die from COVID. And not all of these individuals had pre-existing conditions. If you think that all 400,000 of them had pre-existing conditions, I need you to do a little bit more research. Please. It's not fake. I don't even know what to say when people think that it's fake. Literally, it is a global phenomenon. This isn't just a US thing. I know people that have gotten COVID. And for people that think the vaccine is some sort of mind control drug, come on. In what world? I'll tell you a world, in the social media world, that continues to present false information. Because they want to put their party above the other party or parties. I know that there are other parties. I know, but in our societal system, there are two parties that exist. Unfortunately. And with that being said, we are literally the only country in the world that has a political system like ours. The only country in the world. Even researchers don't understand how our system continues to work. Because other countries have tried it and they've failed. They have failed miserably. There is no other country where you can have one party that represents the legislature and then another party that represents the president. In most countries, it is a straight slate. Somehow, we're still here in this system. I don't know. That's beyond me. But here is what I saw in the acts that Biden signed. Here's what I saw watching the inauguration, hearing people speak, and really just the social media presence afterward, right? So the 17 acts were signed, some of them undoing stuff that Trump had done, halting building the wall, removing the Muslim ban, which is inhumane in itself, protecting dreamers, again, COVID response, right? All of these things that were not a focal point for Donald Trump. Humane acts of compassion, humane acts of treating people how they should be treated and not stereotyping them, or, God forbid, exiling them for the way that they look, which has been American history in its entirety. But hear me out. Joe Biden, by no means, is my first pick. Yes, I voted for him. But at the end of the day, he is the one that showed human compassion and that human lives mattered. I can't say that enough. Human lives matter. This podcast is called For the Love of Humankind. For one of those reasons. Actually, for all of those reasons. We need to support each other. But we can't support each other if the other person is not willing to learn or take into account that our lives matter. This is not an all lives matter commentary. Because all lives matter doesn't exist until Black lives matter, until brown lives matter, until those that are being exiled and whatever, held in cages because of the way that they look or where they come from. That is what the movement of Black Lives Matter means. Okay, I'm going on a tangent. I'm sorry. Anyway, it all pertains to each other. It's all correlated. All of these things we have seen in the last year, and that's why it has been so frustrating for me over the last year and why I have felt so hopeless because of everything that was taking place. America has started to show its true colors. Truly show. It's been there. It has been there. And its true colors are racist. Can we still talk about Colin Kaepernick? Or is that too soon? I don't know. You tell me. But, moving forward, we saw some great performances during Inauguration Day. We saw some wholesome moments that really made me feel like we are turning a new leaf and going in a different direction. Like, if I were to describe the way that I felt on the 19th compared to the way that I felt on the 20th, it would be from the bottom, like the depths, like rock bottom of hope of where we're at, to just like the sky is the limit. And that is because I never thought that day would come. I never thought that day would come. Now, one of the things that I loved so much, and as I said, the performances, the interactions, just some of the wholesome situations that took place, right? Let's talk about Amanda, the 22-year-old National Poet Laureate that stunned the world with her poem. So many great things in that poem about where life has been over the last year. and the last 4 years. So many great things. One of the biggest things that I took away from that poem, there are a few things, but one of my favorite lines was, just is not justice. Just is not justice. Just because we do one thing doesn't mean that we're doing justice for everybody else, or for the situation, or for our history. There are a lot of innocent people that have lost their lives this year, year before that, throughout history. Whether it be from police brutality, whether it be from a pandemic that didn't need to happen the way that it happened, hate crimes, bigotry, rioting, insurrections. All of these things have caused innocent people to die. Justice is not justice. One of the most impactful things that I saw on Wednesday. Now, Lady Gaga came out. Before that, rocking the Mockingjay. It wasn't a Mockingjay, but it basically looked like a Mockingjay. I was like, this is giving me major Hunger Games vibes. Let me tell you, major Hunger Games vibes. But she delivered. Even before that, we saw Kamala come out and fist bumping, giving hugs to Barack and Michelle. And that moment between Barack and Kamala, and that moment between Michelle and Kamala, it was beautiful. They're like, you got this. This is yours. You are making history. The first woman to be vice president. The first African American woman to be vice president. The first Asian American woman to be vice president. Ever. Huge. Monumental. She's going to do great things. She truly is going to do great things. But those moments, those slight moments of the nonverbals that took place, that were caught on camera, change is here. And change can be scary. I get that. But show some hope. Biden and Kamala are not going to destroy your home. They're not. They aren't going to do as much harm to people as the last 4 years has done. I get the allegiance towards parties. I get the polarization. That's what our society has moved towards. And it doesn't help our system by any means. But have some hope. Have some respect for the people next to you, and have some respect for the people whose lives you don't understand, or the experiences you don't understand that they've been through. Don't discredit the experiences that people have had because you identify differently than them. Don't just assume you know the entire story of what took place because you saw it on one media outlet. Do some research. Explore media outlets that are on both sides of the spectrum. Find media outlets that consider themselves right in the middle. It is so hard these days to find ourselves empathizing and sympathizing with those that are in the other party. It is, and that's a fact of life. It's hard to understand where the other group is coming from when they don't want to take the time to understand where you're coming from. That's polarization, folks. That's polarization. And our country is going to continue to be polarized unless something changes. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that change looks like. But I'm hoping that we're moving in the right direction. I'm tired of being without hope. I'm tired of fearing that I'm going to lose people in my life because of a pandemic, because of a potential civil war, because of whatever. I'm tired of feeling that way. And I can't be the only one. And that's why I felt hopeful after Wednesday. I think we are moving in a better direction. And I hope we are moving in a better direction. I know there are people that are not going to support anything that Biden does. But think about if you voted for Bush. Think about if you voted for Clinton. Bill, not Hillary. Think about the things that took place in that election and in those presidencies. If you were part of an older generation, you probably saw qualities on both sides. So think about that. Treat people decent. No, treat people better than decent. People deserve to be treated as their own unique selves. We're not going to share the same ideals as the person next to us. And we're not going to share the same ideals as every person that's in Congress or in office. If we did, God, the world would be so much better. We would be in a utopia if that were the case. Right? Like, just thinking about that. But hope is here. And I'm hopeful. One of the other things that just made me even more satisfied and smile like I haven't in a while. And feeling the burn more than I probably have in the past. The way that Bernie Sanders showed up to that inauguration and the memes that have followed supplies me with so much joy. And so as we wrap up this week for the love of humankind, I want to share some of my favorite Bernie Sanders memes with you all from the inauguration. Thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of For the Love of Humankind. I hope you come back I hope you like, subscribe, and comment some of your thoughts down below. I am excited for this journey. I am excited to see where this goes. And for the love of humankind, treat each other with respect, love one another, and try to understand where people are coming from. Until next time, take care.